You know that simple tape measure you have lying around in a drawer somewhere? Well, it turns out it can tell you a whole lot more than just your waist size. It can actually unlock some pretty fascinating secrets about your body's structure, your muscle health, and maybe even give you a heads up about potential injuries. So let's get into it and unravel the science of measurement. Yeah, really think about that. Every single measurement, from how tall you are to the length of your arms and legs, is telling a story. It's a story about your body's unique structure, how it functions, and its overall health. So, what's your story?
To figure out how to read that story, we need to dive into this really cool field of science called anthropometry. It's a bit of a mouthful, I know, but it's basically the science of measurement, and trust me, it's way more powerful than you might think.
So what is it really? Simply put, anthropometry is the scientific study of our body's dimensions. We're talking about the precise measurement of bone, muscle, and even fat tissue. Think of it like this. It's the science that takes your body's physical traits and turns them into powerful, really useful data.
And you know the best part about all this? It's super accessible. It's totally non-invasive, so no needles or anything like that. The techniques are surprisingly easy to pick up, and the equipment, well, it's often as simple as that portable tape measure we were just talking about. In a world full of expensive, complicated scans, this is some seriously powerful science you can use pretty much anywhere.
All right, so here's the game plan for this explainer. We'll start by talking about how to measure the body's frame. Then, we're going to play detective and solve something I like to call the limb length mystery. After that, we'll check out what girth measurements tell us about muscle and fat. And finally, we'll connect all the dots to really understand why these numbers are so important for our health.
Okay, first things first. Let's look at the absolute foundations of the body's frame, our stature and the length of our limbs.
We're going to kick things off with the measurement we all know, stature, or, just our standing height. It might seem super basic, but getting this one right and getting it accurately is the crucial first step for literally everything else that follows. So to do it like the pros, you stand barefoot with your back straight up against a wall. Then a mark is made at the tippy top of your skull. That's called the vertex. And you just measure the distance from that mark to the floor. See? It's that level of precision that makes the data so reliable and so useful.
Okay, now for the fun part. Let's see how these simple measurements can turn us into detectives. Imagine someone walks into a clinic with a limp. How on earth can a tape measure help us find the hidden cause?
Well, the central mystery for a physical therapist is this. Is that limp coming from a muscular imbalance, or is there an actual difference in the length of the bones themselves?
And this is where it gets tricky, because there are two possibilities. First, you've got what's called apparent shortening. This is where a muscle issue, maybe a tilted pelvis, makes one leg look shorter, even though the bones are exactly the same length. Then you have true shortening, where one of the bones, either the femur or the tibia, is physically, measurably shorter, maybe from birth or from an old injury.
So, how do you solve the mystery? How do you tell the difference? Well, clinicians have this clever little physical exam called the quick test, and it's designed to do just that. Pinpoint if the shortening is true, and get this, it can even identify which bone is the culprit.
Here's how it works. The person just lies on their back with their knees bent. First, you look at the height of the knees from the side. If one knee is sitting lower than the other, boom, there's your first clue. That leg has a shorter tibia. Next, you look from the front. If one knee seems like it's further back or not sticking out as much, well, the femur is the shorter bone. It's so simple, but what a powerful diagnostic tool.
So, we've seen how measurements can help diagnose the body's frame. But what about its composition? What it's made of. Let's switch gears a bit and see where girth, or circumference measurements, come into play.
It's actually amazing what that tape measure can reveal just by wrapping it around a limb or your torso. It can give us a good idea of the amount of fat just under the skin. That's subcutaneous fat. It helps us track muscle loss or muscle growth over time, and it can even detect and measure swelling in a joint.
And when we're talking about body composition, being able to track those changes in muscle and fat is just huge, both for tracking fitness and for just monitoring your overall health.
And different spots on the body tell us different parts of the story. For example, a mid-arm girth measurement gives you a general sense of muscle and fat there. Your waist girth, well, that's a really key indicator of abdominal fat. And thigh girth is a fantastic way to keep an eye on the mass of those big quad muscles.
But it's not just about muscle and fat. One of the most important clinical uses for girth measurements is to spot something you might not even be able to see with the naked eye, joint swelling. It's also called edema, which is really just an excess of fluid hanging out in the joint. Now, the two crucial things here are precision and comparison. For a knee, for instance, measurements are taken at very specific points around the joint to track any fluid buildup. For an ankle, you measure at the narrowest point right above the ankle bones. But in every single case, the absolute key is to compare that measurement to the other healthy limb. That comparison is what turns a simple number into a powerful diagnostic tool.
Okay, so we've looked at height, we've looked at limb length, we've looked at circumference. Let's bring it all home and talk about why these numbers truly matter. What's the real story this data is telling us?
So here's the bottom line. Anthropometry is this powerful but incredibly accessible science. It helps doctors and therapists find the real root cause of problems, like a limp. It lets all of us track our fitness progress without any invasive procedures. And it acts as a vital sign for the health of our joints.
All of this amazing information is literally hiding in plain sight. It's accessible with just a simple tape measure and a little bit of knowledge. So the next time you see a doctor or a physical therapist, you'll know the deeper story that these simple numbers can tell. So the real question is, what will you ask at your next checkup?